Hello everyone, and thank you for joining the July 2020 TAM customer webinar. This webinar is organised by the VMware TAM organisation with the intent of providing our TAM customers with the opportunity to hear great content and interact with us directly. Please make use of the Q&A feature to ask any questions, and if your question doesn't get addressed today, be sure to reach out to your TAM and ask them to follow up. Before we get into today's content, I'd like to point out a few things. Our next TAM customer webinar will be on the 12th of August, where we'll be joined by John Diaz to talk about vRealize Lifecycle Management and how that can be used to accelerate your time to value. You can use the Q&A feature in Zoom for any questions, and this webinar is being recorded so your TAM can make the recording available to you. So today we have another great topic lined up covering the new lifecycle improvement features in vSphere 7. vCenter Server Update Planner and VM Template Management. vSphere 7 being a large step forward on many fronts, as we're going to hear. Today we're delighted to welcome Nigel Hickey, who is a technical marketing architect and VCIX working for VMware R&D in the Cloud Platform Business Unit. Nigel can be found blogging on nigelhickey.com or on Twitter as vCenter Nerd. And a lesser known fact is that Nigel used to be a hip hop DJ and was once featured in Hip Hop Weekly magazine, which is a true story. With that said, I'll turn over to Nigel for today's session.
Good morning. Yes, that is a true story. Also joining me today is Niels Hagoort. So Niels should be on the line as well.
I am, definitely.
Good morning, Niels.
Well, good afternoon for me, right? I am in the Netherlands, so.
There you are. All right. So we'll get started here real quick. Nigel Hickey, technical marketing architect, specifically around vCenter Server, some vSphere lifecycle and upgrade. And then Niels Hagoort, working on my team as well in technical marketing. Niels?
Yeah. Definitely. So I'm Niels Hagoort. Like I said, I reside in the Netherlands. So I'm at the other end of the pond. And in my daily role as a technical marketing architect, I cover basically everything vSphere ESXi. That includes resource management. That includes hardware accelerators and compatibility. And definitely includes ESXi lifecycle as well. Some cool stuff that we will discuss in this session as well.
You should have some control there to click. Just let me know, Niels.
We'll try that in a bit. Just take it from here.
All righty. So do you want to start off there, or do you want me to start off?
Yeah, I can start it off.
Okay,
and
yeah, go ahead.
This is one of my favorite marketing slides. So we'll keep it short and not discuss every bit in it. What I wanted to convey is that what everybody knows, lifecycle typically is a pain point in every IT organization, right? Because it takes a lot of effort and a lot of operational effort, and that drains time, right? And time is money. So with vSphere 7, finally we have a new major release on our hands, and we did a lot of work to make lifecycle easier. And we did so for not only vCenter Server, not only for ESXi hosts, but for the actual workloads and the templates, etc. as well. So in today's session, let me check if I have control as well. And I don't, actually, Nigel. Huh. Can you click to the next slide, Nigel, for me? There we go. We'll fix
I'll click for you if you need to.
Oh, perfect. Okay. So about this slide, these are the three key areas that we did improve in vSphere 7. So we'll go deep into vCenter server profiles, which is a great way or a great first step in the right direction to create that consistency across multiple vCenter server instances. We have a lot of customers that have a large presence, maybe even a global presence, and a lot of vCenter server instances out there. And definitely a large ask from a lot of customers was to have a feature, a capability baked in vSphere to create that consistency across those vCenter server instances. So Nigel will be discussing that. And Nigel will also be discussing Update Planner as well, a great new way to get notified about vCenter server instances, do some pre-checks, etc., all from within the vSphere client. And from within the vSphere client, that is a common theme for vSphere 7, right? We don't want VI admins, customers, to log in into the VAMI, the virtual appliances management interface of vCenter server, for example, or individual ESXi OS, etc., etc. So Update Planner helps in the vCenter server update area. And I will cover the vSphere Lifecycle Manager in the middle here. And this is all about implementing ESXi host consistency across clusters. And we did some really nifty stuff in there as well, because no longer are we only able to push out ESXi builds and patches and updates, but we extended that with firmware updates as well. So Nigel, let's
all right.
take it from here.
So we'll kick off vCenter server profiles. And I'd first like to be transparent and say that it's not my favorite name, because we all know that host profiles sometimes were a pain in the butt in the past, but please, put that behind you, and vCenter profiles is quite different. So like Neil said, it's a way to capture the settings or the configuration of your vCenter server from one kind of gold image or one vCenter server that's at your ideal state, and then be able to pass that configuration by importing it into other vCenter servers. And this does not require the vCenter server to be rebooted. Consider this: most of the settings that you're seeing in a vCenter server profile, like you see at the top here, management, network authentication, and user configurations, are most of the things that we see in the VAMI or the virtual appliance management interface on port 5480. So what we can do here is we can export the configuration from a vCenter server and pass it down to the other machines. If that's we want to turn off SSH, or we want to enable SSH, or we want to set up the backup on the appliance, whatever that may be, we can just export that, pass it over, and away we go. This can be done in a fashion of up to 100 vCenter servers at the moment. So if you're taking one configuration, you can pass it to a stack of 100 VCs and be able to stamp them out with the same configuration. So as of today, for GA of vSphere 7, it is only as a REST API. There's no UI, there's no user interface within the vSphere client as of yet. But as we can see from what we do at VMware, normally we start off with CLI or an API, and then we grow that into working into the vSphere interface. So we're hoping to see that evolve. But what we have here is we have the 4 APIs. We have REST APIs. It's list, export, validate, and import. And also noted that these, since they're just REST APIs, they can be consumed with anything that can consume a REST API. If that's Postman, if that's Ansible, Puppet, Chef, you can run this through DCLI. If you have DCLI, when you're connecting to your VCSA, you can run that directly from there. And also Power CLI can call APIs as well. So it's quite flexible and trying to make it work across, maximum tooling that's out there. So as a first step, basically what happens is the export API is run, and that exports the configuration of the vCenter server. And then you get that as a JSON file, and you can make your edits to that JSON file. And when you make those edits, then when that modification is done, what we're going to do is change those pieces we want, and then we can validate that import. And how that works is basically we run a validate API and validate that we haven't messed up that JSON. If anyone's like me, I've accidentally deleted lines into JSON or missed a config or a quote or a comma. So it's easy to fat finger some of those things. So the validation here will just make sure that your JSON is intact and there's no invalid errors with it prior to passing it off to the VCSA. Oh, let's see, actually in there. So basically when that happens, we pass it over to VCSA, and instantly that that setting has changed. So when we say we change something like the backup, I can hit the API, pass the JSON that has the right backup config in there, go log into the VCSA, or even refresh the screen if I was still logged in, and you'll see the backup configured. Also wanted to put it out there that we have included these as APIs in API Explorer, but the naming is a little different. So I like to call this out. In the naming of the vSphere client, it was originally called Infrastructure Profiles when vSphere 7 was being designed. You may see this change as we get through the life cycle of 7 into update 1, update 2. We're looking to kind of align those names so the API would also have the same name of vCenter Server Profiles and not Infrastructure Profiles. But in this example, the easiest way to find that is just by typing profile at the top search there when you're in API Explorer and making sure that you're using the select API and picking the appliance as the API endpoint that you're searching for that profile. And you can go ahead and you can run these from API Explorer as well, get your JSON and edit that JSON.
Hey, Nigel, a couple questions.
Yeah.
That come up about the 100 vCenter limit, first of all.
Yeah.
And so what if we have more, and then does it only apply to the scope of a single SSO domain?
So right now it should be no SSO domain issue. So you're just taking the config of the vCenter server and you're passing it to another vCenter server. So you're just passing it to that IP as long as you can get connected or that host name. You should be fine. There shouldn't be any issue with the SSO on there. Also, the 100 is like at a time. So it doesn't mean like if you had 200 vCenters, you can only do 100 of them. It means when I run that command to import, I can put a list of 100 vCenters on the end of that API and say, here's the list or read from this list, So it's 100 on that. So I could do 100 and then go do another 100.
Okay, got it. And then what about configuration drift? Is there any sort of notification on that, or how does that work?
Hopefully, yeah. Let's see here. Okay, I'm going to move on, and if there's anything else with that, just stop me here.
Okay.
Another great feature that came with Lifecycle Management was Update Planner. And Update Planner, to me, is something that I wish I had when I had 5.5 or even 6. I'm pretty sure that all of us on the phone have been out to the matrix a bunch of times. We've been into the product interoperability screens. We've put those into spreadsheets. We've matched them up to see what version works with what. So vCenter Server Update Planner is trying to consolidate all of that work into a simple workflow. So what this allows is it pops up and shows you that an update is available for vCenter Server. You can click on the update. You can go through and you can run an interoperability report to make sure that the version of vCenter Server that you want to apply to your environment is compatible with the other products in your environment, and running a what if workflow to see if it is compatible. You can also add other products to see if the compatibility is there. And I'll show you a couple screens coming up here. But imagine not going out to the web and not going to interoperability matrix and not having to go through all of these pre-checks in another environment or outside of vSphere. You can do all of that within the vSphere client. Now, one thing I will mention here, and I'm not sure if it's in the slides, but to make vCenter Server Update Planner work, your customer or the customers on the phone, this is for TAMs as well, the customer has to participate in the customer experience improvement program, the CEIP. And that's our telemetry data program where we're actually capturing telemetry data. Now, in versions 5 and 6, we weren't really giving anything back to you, right? We were just saying, give us your telemetry data. We'll tell you that, this is not working or this is running too, hot or lean or whatever the case may be. Now we're able to give you stuff back. If you subscribe to that, you get Update Planner, you get vSphere, vSphere Health, which is Skyline Health for vSphere. You get vSAN Health. You get some other things like vSAN Support Insight if you're a vSAN customer. So by enabling that feature, you're getting more features built into the client. And think about it, it's going out to the repository for you and doing all the queries for interoperability and bringing that back into the interface. So it's making your life a little bit easier. So there's a little trade-off there, but TAMs or customers, if you guys have any questions on CEIP, you can definitely talk to me. I have a lot of documentation that we can share with security teams to show them what type of data we're capturing and maybe make it easier for teams with tight security to enable that to be able to get these cool features that are coming in 7. Now, moving on to update planners, interoperability here, or when you open up the update planner and there's a release available, you'll see the release date, the version, the build number, what type of update it was, is a reboot required? And then one of the great features is there's a link directly to the release notes, because sometimes finding release notes is a little bit difficult. The release notes are tied directly to that version number. You can click on that, would pop you into the browser. When you run your pre-update checks, it will tell you, just as you're doing an upgrade, check this, make sure these extensions are okay before you upgrade. This is kind of like your health check report for the upgrade or the update. From here, you can hit export, and that will actually export into a Excel file or a CSV, so you can actually share that. When you fix stuff, you can come back in here and hit the refresh button in the corner, and it will run the pre-check update again and make sure that any issues or warnings that you've corrected are now gone. And there's also an interoperability. When you run the interoperability, and this is just demo stuff here, so don't pay attention too much to the version numbers that are in there. This list will show you what's in the environment and what's compatible. So you can see the current version, the compatible version, and if there's release notes available for that version. So say here where we have vRealize Automation 7.5 is the current version and 8 is compatible. But if we wanted to drop this list down and choose maybe 7.9 or 7.8, if that was an option, we can compare versions and run it again to see, okay, well, I'm not going to get a full green if I don't go to this version. Just like vCloud Director there was no compatible version. So these are ways to kind of make life easier without going back and forth, and you can export this as well. The modified product list at the top is basically because vCenter Server and the Update Planner together are not able to query every single VMware product because of the way they interact with vCenter Server. Some authenticate differently than others, and because of that, we're working to add more products to that list. So in the meantime, if something is not discovered from VMware, you can click that modify product list button, and there'll be a list of other products like Horizon, Log Insight, and some other versions for vRealize that don't show up right away. And you can add those in there, and you can also play around with the version numbers or what version you're trying to go to. So this is makes life a little easier for that. This is a little update planner demo here. Actually, this one, that's not the good one. Here's the good one. I never deleted the other one, so we'll go with this one. I reran a new one today because the last one had a cool error on it. But basically, you come in here, you can see the release date came out the other day. You can generate the report, and we can do an interop and come back and see. This environment doesn't have much installed in it, so it's just going to come back with the ESXi hosts. And then when we do a pre-check, it's going to pre-check to see if this build can go to the next version, and there's no issues found. So from here, we click on Appliance Management. It goes right to the VAMI interface. Of course, I'm already logged in. You'll need to log in here, and then you can go right to the Update tab. And from here, we can see that same version, and from there, we can go ahead and stage and install that. So it makes the process a little more streamlined. Either hitting the blue button at the top here that you see at the very top of the screen, which says View Updates, or the small update button that you see in the demo. Both of them take you to the same page, which is the Updates tab all the way at the end there, past extensions. So that's pretty much how that works. One other thing that we wanted to kind of cover based along vCenter Server is template management. And I'm going to show this demo here and kind of walk through this as we go. But in vSphere 7, we have check-in and check-out operations for virtual machine templates. And these are specific to the VMTX template. So not OVAs or OVFs. This is specific to the VMTX, so the native template for VMware. So what we see here is a new look on the template where we can actually check this template out. So what we do is we're able to check it back into a VM or turn it into a VM, like we used to right click, clone, copy it back from a template to a virtual machine and then make our changes. We're doing all of that through this button here. So we're able to consolidate that workflow. And as we click through this, you'll see that it's also on the main page as well as there's a versioning tab. And then when we click on this button here, I'll just leave that for a moment there. So basically, the virtual machine templates that are stored in content libraries can be edited with this method. So if your templates are not stored in a content library, you do not get this cool feature of versioning. It's only for templates that are stored in the content library. So as we go through here, it'll start to check out. And if there's any questions as we're kind of going through this, just stop me, because I can pause this little demo here. And then after this, we're going to skip over to Niels, let him talk about some lifecycle changes. So here we're making the virtual machine like we would when we right click and clone it back to, from a template. We're just making a name change. I'm putting it into my template folder, picking my compute resources and so forth. You'll see what it does. It just copies that back out to a template. And now we have kind of a history there of what's going on. We can see at the top is our newest template that we just checked out, and the original one at the bottom. And we also have like little audit trails so we can see who did what, which administrator was logged in, what time this was done at, and so forth. At this point, what happens now is you go and you make your changes to your template, right? So, or your virtual machine. Maybe you need to add some updates from the OS. Maybe you need to change some of the hardware. In this demo here, we're just going to add some virtual hardware. So we're going to do some edit settings. We'll go ahead and add a new device in here. And we'll also, I think, do a change on some memory. Then once we're done with that, we're just imagining that we've done our patch Tuesdays and so forth, and we're ready and we're done with this virtual machine and the template changes that we need. We can check it back into a template and put notes on that so we understand what's going on, and someone that comes back in here later can see what Nigel did earlier and was that necessary. Then when we check that back in, it's going to convert from a virtual machine back into a VM template. And now when we go back up to the versioning screen here, you can see what happened. You can see that I added my notes where I had the second NIC, I applied the patches, and now it's the most recent template being at the top. Now, if we didn't like that template, we still have some options here. We can revert back to the template that we started with this morning, or we can even delete this original template if we're just done with that and we want today's version to be the only version that's out there. So something to note here, you'll notice here, when you click on the older one, which was the original one, it shows this is not the original or the current template. Please go to this template to configure it. You can either click on the template or you can click directly on the hyperlink there of the template name. It'll take you back to the right template to make your edits or whatever you have to do. There's also a new view that's kind of showing off in this video here. So this new view is not necessarily just for templates. This is for virtual machine template view. We have this new view that looks like tiles that you can drag those tiles around. And it's just as easy as clicking on the customize view button there. There's a couple things that are in gray that you won't be able to change, but the things in blue you can change, and you can always go back to classic. So we're going to go ahead and delete this this original template here just to show you what happens when we delete that. So you get a warning that the operation is permanent, deletes all the files with the template, of course. And once we do that, there's still some history there to show what's going on. You'll notice that now we have no options at the bottom where the first template was, but it didn't delete who the administrator was and when that template was made. So there's still an audit trail that helps keep track of what happened there. And that, my friends, is template check-in, check-out.
Hey, Nigel, a couple questions.
Yeah.
So the first one was back on the intro, general kind of slide, talking about, oh, it just disappeared here. So it's talking about the DSC for VMware solution. The desired state configuration.
Yes.
I actually just answered that one.
Okay,
good.
perfect.
Awesome.
All right. The other ones then are related to internet access. And does Update Planner work in an environment without internet access?
So you would have to proxy out through the CEIP program. So you could use the proxy with vCenter server and be able to get out to that CEIP site, and it's a known website and a known space. So it's vcsa.vmware.com. So it's the same, 443 port and like a trusted URL. So it's something like that could be proxied out just to get to that site, and that would allow you to participate in CEIP. But if you're in an air gap scenario where you're not allowed to do that, then you don't get the features that come with CEIP.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so maybe I'll let you drop the Q&A and while Niels takes over then.
Yeah, totally. I'll
right,
do that.
perfect.
Niels, and I'll click through. Niels, just give me what you need.
Yeah, well, Nigel, please just stop sharing. I'll share my screen. That works a lot.
Oh, that works better. Yeah.
Yeah.
Look at us. We're so smart.
Let me check. Yeah, come on, share screen. There we go.
Awesome.
All right. Is this visible for everybody?
Good.
Perfect. All right. So we've talked about Update Manager or Update Planner and vCenter server profiles. Now let's dig into vSphere Lifecycle Manager. Now, like I said in the intro before, this is about the ESXi hosts themselves, right? And what we see with vSphere 7 is with the introduction of VLCM, which is short for vSphere Lifecycle Manager, we see a comprehensive set of tools that allows us to create that consistency on ESXi hosts, right? So the foundation of this all is a desired state model, a declarative ESXi cluster management framework that we build. And that allows us to enforce that host consistency and make sure that all the hosts are compliant. So we'll dig into that and what that actually means and what that looks like in the UI. And this is about ESXi build version, so the ESXi base images, but also for vendor components and optional firmware and drivers. Now, talking about firmwares and drivers, we introduced a new framework as part of VLCM that allows us to push out full stack firmware updates across all the ESXi hosts. Now, for the first 7 release, this is limited to Dell and HP hosts. So typically the first question that I get is, what about other vendors, right? What about Cisco? What about Lenovo, Fujitsu? We'll discuss that in a later slide, I guess. So stay tuned for more information, I would say. The simplified OEM customization, that's definitely something that I would like to highlight as well, because we made it a lot more easy for OEM vendors to basically provide a vendor component package, and we can slipstream that into the desired state model. So no longer do we need to wait for a vendor to come up with a custom ISO when a new vSphere feature releases. So that is helpful, far more efficient. Cluster quick start is just something I quickly wanted to highlight in a one slider later on. And this is all about how to start VLCM from the get-go, right? We have a lot of customers creating a lot of clusters on a weekly, maybe even daily basis. And Cluster Quick Start, that whole workflow allows them to immediately start using vSphere features like HA, high availability, or DRS, or distributed resource scheduler. And we complemented that with VLCM as well. Now, the last thing we'll discuss in this session is the automatic checks. And this is a really cool way, sort of the same. You can compare it a little bit to Update Planner, where we have an integrated compatibility check for devices within your host, and specifically in the first release for vSAN deployments and storage controllers. So let's start off with the desired state model, the foundation of VLCM. Now, this is a cool graphic of what it actually is, right? We create and configure a desired state for an entire cluster, because like with other vSphere features, HADRS, the cluster is the boundary for VLCM. Now you see that base image, the vendor add-on and firmware drivers and add-on, and we'll discuss a little bit later on what that actually means and what that looks like. In the end, we create that desired state image. Now we continuously check if all the hosts are compliant to that image. And whenever we see that a host's drift from that compliancy, from that desired state image, we'll get notified and we'll immediately can remediate that drift back and remediate that host or multiple hosts back to compliancy. Digging a little bit deeper into that cluster image and what that looks like. A lot of questions have arose as well if we can use multiple vendors in one cluster, or what happens if you have multiple generations of the same host type in one cluster. And first of all, let me state that using VLCM, you could use VLCM with only the ESXi base version, right? Because that also already allows you to create that consistency from a ESXi base image perspective, right? The vendor add-ons and the firmwares and drivers are completely optional. That vendor add-on, the packages that we already discussed a little bit, that is all about what a vendor wants on a ESXi host, right? So we talk about drivers, but also hardware providers, maybe some other configuration tools on those ESXi hosts. Basically, we let that up to the vendor itself to decide what to ship in the ESXi, what they want to ship with the ESXi hosts as well. Now, the firmwares and drivers, that is obviously that whole vendor integration that we have set up. And we'll discuss what that actually looks like. So first of all, if you see VLCM in your vSphere client, there's a couple of things to note here. And the first thing I wanted to point out is the image depot. This is a new construct that we now use with VLCM. And the cool thing about the image depot is that it allows for automatic downloads of ESXi base images and the vendor add-ons and some other components as well. Not the firmware and the firmware integration with the vendor. That is done separately to this. But the image depot and automatic downloads, that helps you create that desired state image right away, right? So no longer do we specifically need to go to myvmware.com, download all the bits, upload them again into vCenter server using the vSphere client, obviously, and start to create a baseline or an image in this specific case. Obviously, this would require internet connectivity, and with Update Planner, either you have direct internet access from your vCenter server. You could also use the proxy of vCenter server. If you're, for whatever reason, completely isolated, you can obviously upload the bits manually as well. But this is all to create to make it far more simpler for customers to start using VLCM and start using and updating their hosts, right? So this is already a slightly older screenshot, because if you look at VLCM and the image depot right now, you'll see those new patches in there as well. Also, we already see some added vendor add-ons. You'll see that in a coming slide as well. So this allows you to immediately start using VLCM, right? Another thing that I wanted to point out is the settings, because there are some remediation settings going on, and those look really similar to VUM. And we'll discuss in the later slide how to start using VLCM and how it compares to VUM as well. The thing that I wanted to highlight here is Quick Boot. Now, Quick Boot is disabled by default because Quick Boot needs hosts that are actually compatible with Quick Boot. Now, that list of compatible hosts is obviously growing. So there's a lot of Dell and HP hosts on there. And since the last patches, we also, for instance, support Cisco UCS hosts on there. So that is definitely a feature that is worth considering when using VLCM. Now, for those not known, who do not know Quick Boot, it is introduced in 6.7. And this quick demo just shows you what is going on, because on the right-hand side, we reboot a host without Quick Boot, and it is a full power cycle, right? On the left-hand side, you'll notice that ESXi kernel is already back, and that is because with Quick Boot, we only reboot the vSphere kernel itself. And this helps immensely, especially with VLCM or VUM, if you're updating the ESXi bits. or drivers in ESXi, etc. Because that would not require a full host reboot, right? And if you look at a specific, or if you look at host configurations, and especially the memory layout and the hardware configuration, a typical host reset, a complete host cycle, power cycle, could easily take up minutes, up to 10 minutes, 15 minutes, depending on host configuration. We've seen even hosts that take even longer than that. And now think about this on scale, right? What if you have tens or hundreds or thousands of hosts? Quick boot will be an immense time saver. So obviously, if you have the firmware integration set up with VLCM and we need to remediate the hosts and also push out firmwares, then you would still need a full power cycle, right? Because we use the out-of-band management tooling of the vendor itself. But Quick Boot will definitely help you if you're only updating ESXi bits. Now, like I just said, how to start using VLCM. If you upgrade or install vSphere 7, you will still be using VUM, vSphere Update Manager. And this is what you see in this UI screenshot as well. If you look at the left-hand side, you see hosts and you see baselines. That is the baseline methodology used by VUM. Now, you'll also notice that we now have a button in there that states manage with a single image. This is basically how you start setting the cluster up for VLCM. Now, let me emphasize again that the cluster, you can mix and match VLCM with VUM, right? So you need to choose one for a cluster. Maybe you have new hosts that are already all ESXi 7, it's all the same host make and model, and all the requirements are in place, right? So you can start using VLCM for that specific cluster. And another cluster might not yet be on vSphere 7. So that will allow you to just use VUM, right? Like I said, we do have a couple of requirements to use VLCM, to start using VLCM, because it is the path forwards. So we do require vSphere 7 and up. All the hosts in the cluster must run ESXi 7 and up. Now, I just mentioned the same host make and model. There is some discussion going on about the model, because if you have a baseline, if you have that desired state image set up and that covers, for example, multiple generations of that same model, you could easily combine those in one cluster. And theoretically, you could even use different host vendors, but that would then limit you to just use the ESXi base image of VLCM. So you will not be using VLCM to its fullest capabilities, right? So we definitely recommend the same host make for the entire cluster, and a model is a different thing maybe. Now, another thing here to note is that we, with VLCM, do not support stateless hosts. So moving forward, the focus is really on stateful hosts. So if you're using auto deploy with stateless installations, you should maybe start looking at transferring them to stateful hosts. And that has everything to do with the bits that we need to place on the ESXi hosts themselves. So make sure to keep that in mind. Another question that comes along when talking about VLCM is support for NSX. Now, in the first release of VLCM, we do not support NSX. This is coming, however, in a future update release. However, if you are using VCF today, VCF 4 or higher, we do have options to utilize VLCM, and we'll slipstream the NSXT bits in there as well. Because in the end, NSXT is just some kernel modules that needs to be shipped with the desired state model. Now, if you start using VLCM, like I said, you'll be replacing the baseline methodology used by VUM for this specific cluster. Again, you can mix and match clusters. So just to show you what I just said, right? We have that conversion from VUM to VLCM, but you might have other clusters in here that you would still like to use VUM for. So that is definitely a supported environment. Now, this is just a quick demo that shows you what it looks like. So we still have the baseline methodology. We click manage with a single image and we'll set up the image. Now, we'll check the cluster readiness. And in this specific case, I'm using hosts with a custom ISO. So a couple of VIPs on there. And obviously, I still want those components on the host, but I'll replace them with a vendor add-on. In this specific case, I'm running Dell hosts. So I'm choosing the Dell add-on that Dell provided. So saving that image, it'll check against the cluster for image compliancy. And obviously, we'll get notified if some VIPs will be removed. And we'll be able to finish that image setup. And once we do so, we can run a pre-check to see what is happening and if that everything is set up correctly. And we can later on remediate all the hosts. Now, if you are done remediating the host, this is what that looks like, right? So the cluster is up to date and there's no new recommended cluster images available. Now, a couple of things to note here is that desired state image, the image that we see here in the UI, you can edit that at any given time, right? So maybe there is a new patch of ESXi coming out that is automatically downloaded if you have that internet access to your image depot, and you'll be able, clicking edit, you'll be able to immediately choose that new ESXi version. And by doing so, creating a new desired state image, and now you can remediate those hosts back to compliancy because they drifted from that desired state image that you configured, right? Same goes for vendor add-on as well. And you see that button, the three dots next to the edit button. There's a couple of interesting options in there as well. Because one of my favorite things is once you have a cluster set up for VLCM and you're about to add new hosts, so one of the options is to actually export the desired state image, just as an ISO, as a zip, or just export the configuration of the desired state image if you want to move that to another vCenter server, for example. But exporting the ISO, for example, will allow you to immediately install new hosts with the desired state image. So before, we needed to just install ESXi, add them to the cluster, and then start remediating and make sure that everything is compliant to that image, right? So this is, again, a great time saver because you just install that desired state image, and once added to the cluster, they will be compliant from the get-go. Let me first see if we have some questions coming along. There's a couple in there for Nigel still. Okay, so I have Marino with, how is VLCM aware of application stacks dependencies like vCloud Director, NSX, etc.? Like I said, all the NSX is a good example because NSX uses those kernel modules. So there is definitely a dependency with VLCM, and we're working to include full NSX support in future releases. If you talk specifically about vCloud Director, there is integration. vCloud Director hooks into the vCenter server APIs, obviously, but from an ESXi host perspective, there is not much going on between vCloud Director and the vSphere environment.
Hey, Niels, do you want to touch on, there's a question in here from Joshua's son about, I think VMware might consolidate vSphere Lifecycle Manager, vRealize Lifecycle Manager, and have one product to control all, basically. I know that's a popular topic that sometimes comes up.
Yeah, definitely. So the answer is no. We want to keep as many features as possible in the vSphere stack. Now, obviously, that is kidding. We going forward, we're definitely looking to consolidate all those features and capabilities. And we do actually have a slide on how VLCM compares to the lifecycle capabilities of VxRail or VCF. So there are separate solutions today, but we're slowly working to create that one lifecycle platform. That will be a long time away, so baby steps, but hopefully we'll get there. Another interesting question that I see here from Russell Hamker is, will VLCM integrate with host profiles in the future? Now, that is a good question, and that is also a really popular question for good reasons. But the first version of VLCM is about that host consistency. So it's about all the components that we discussed, right? So this has nothing to do yet with the configuration state of the ESXi host. Without saying too much, this is something definitely that has our attention and is on a roadmap. But we need to wait for future releases. So stay tuned is the common answer, I guess. Okay. Let's move on. If your question, I will definitely take a look at the questions later on as well. But for the sake of time, let's.
Yeah, I'll keep moving along and answer the ones I can as well. So,
thank you, Nigel. All right. So full stack firmware updates, another really popular topic with VLCM. And what we did with VLCM is basically create a framework for hardware vendors to hook into. So this is called the Hardware Support Manager, the HSM. And the HSM provides connectivity to vendor catalogs. Like I said, we integrate with Dell and HP in the first release. I know that Lenovo is actually the next in line to be supported and to be included in this framework. But it does require the OEM vendor to put in the work as well, right? Because in the end, we use their tooling to actually update the bits. But we have that integration set up so we can extract information from all the host devices and include them in that desired state model. That is the beauty of VLCM and the HSM framework. Now, do note that the actual upgrading of all the PCIe devices, the BIOS, the out-of-bound management controllers, etc., the actual upgrading is done by the vendor tooling itself. Like I said, we hook into that vendor tooling. So this also means that you might require additional vendor licensing. Looking at the Dell Open Manage integration for VMware vCenter, that requires additional iDRAC licenses, for example. Looking at into the HP solution, it requires ILO advanced licenses. So these are definitely components and constructs that we use. So you need to keep in mind that it might require some additional licensing. Now, the integration varies per vendor, right? So in this specific screenshot, you'll see just my lab with the Open Manage integration. So you need to set up from a Dell perspective that is OVA that you import in vCenter server, you connect it to vCenter server, et cetera, and now you have that integration. You can choose to have set that integration up with VLCM as well. And now you have that integration set up so you can actually import all the devices that are in the hosts and all of its firmware levels and driver levels, right? And this is sort of what that looks like. So this is me and my lab, and included the firmware and drivers add-on, and it's just called Lab Cluster. You can give it a name yourself. But it allows me to see a lot of interesting things here, right? So in the lower highlight, well, there is one highlight. So in that highlight, you see what is going on the host themselves. Now, everybody knows that a hardware device is only as good as its firmware and its driver, right? So it's of the utmost importance for performance, but also for reliability, thus availability, to have those firmwares updated. And we've seen a lot of customers, taking you back to the first slide we mentioned, right, the marketing slide, that are not updating their firmware bits on the hosts because it's such an immense effort to do so. Now, obviously, the vendor tooling itself can help you with that, but extending that with VLCM and have that integrated in that desired state image, that is the way you want it to be, right? Because now, like in this highlight, you see what is running on the host and what is running on the image version. So this will allow you to create that consistency across all those, because yes, you can individually update a host, but how are you going to manage all the firmware versions out there, and how to make sure that all the hosts are equal as how they on firmware versions for specific PCIe devices. So in this screenshot, you'll see the Dell HBA adapter, my storage controller. Now this is running an older version, so I definitely need to remediate this as well. We see a specific disk 2 on backplane 1 that is running a slightly older image, a firmware image, and some NICs here as well. It extends to not only PCIe devices, like I said, but also disks, BIOSes, hardware controllers, iDRAC, ILO, etc. You name it. So from within VLCM integration, I'm able to remediate all my hosts. And what that looks like when I remediate my hosts, and I open, in this specific case, a HP host with an ILO interface, I'll see that the firmware updating is actually going on within the ILO interface, right? So again, to empathize that we just kick off from VLCM, we kick off that job, and we create that job within the vendor tooling, and that vendor tooling will do its work. Now the ESXi host is rebooted again, and will extract all the versions from all the devices into VLCM, and you'll be able to see if the host is now compliant to that desired state image. Now there's a lot to go about these specific integrations and how to set them up and how to use them, because there's definitely some work in setting up those integrations depending on vendor. So we have created a good colleague of us, Pete Fletcher, created these amazing demos. We'll make sure that we share the slide deck with you as well. So you'll have those short URLs on YouTube. And that'll take you to the entire process of what that looks like with the Dell and HP integration with the firmware setup. Do we have some questions about specific?
We got a couple that might be, so let me go back to the top here. Is there a way to use Lifecycle Manager image management as a repository for images for Image Builder for customers that use auto deploy? So kind of, you know, the whole image concept is different, right, from Image Builder and the way we do images in Lifecycle Manager. I think that may be the question of the confusion.
Yeah, I get the confusion. And those are, like you said, two separate things.
Yeah.
Right. So there is no way today to include the images built by Image Builder in VLCM.
And then we have some questions on Quick Boot. With Quick Boot, would the NIC drivers reload or reinitialize? I'm sure that they're just going to reinitialize because we're rebooting the hypervisor, but I wasn't sure how to answer that really. Yeah.
Yeah, to my knowledge, that is exactly that, a reinitialize.
Stateless. What about stateless and stateful backup? I'm not sure that maybe that's around the whole, auto deploy scenario with Lifecycle Manager. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess so. Like I said, stateless is not supported with VLCM, and the main focus, because of other VMware products as well, is definitely for stateful deployments. So yes, it's only supported with stateful deployments, even though you have a state. I'm not sure if you can actually use auto deploy with a stateful backup. What I do know is that if you have local storage available in your hosts, you can easily reconfigure auto deploy to be stateful rather than being stateless.
Mm-hmm. And then I guess that leads into the next question: is auto deploy stateless going to deprecate in upcoming releases? We rely heavily on this feature with no hard drives in our hosts.
Yeah, I see that question from John. Well, John, this is a question that we get a lot. And what I've heard from product management is that, like I said, stateful is the focus, but auto deploy with stateless is still just supported. I have no information just yet if that is going to be deprecated in a future release.
And then I'll give you one more quick one, and then you can jump in here. Does LCM integrate with NVIDIA VIBs?
A good question. We didn't really cover the components with VLCM because we have the ESXi base version, we have the vendor components, we have the firmware integration, but we also have some other additional components in there as well. So this is where you can actually upload drivers as well, like with the NVIDIA VIPs. I believe. So full disclosure here, I haven't tested that myself, but positive that we can make that happen with the components bit, because you can still manually upload components in there. So that way you can in the slipstream the NVIDIA bits in there as well. Like I said, not just tested yet. To that note, others might say, well, hey, I can also slipstream my NSXT bits in there as well. This is not supported, like I said, only with VCF today. And we're looking to integrate that in the upcoming update release of vSphere. All right, we'll keep some of the questions for the end. Let me just continue with my presentation, and we'll make sure that we try to answer them all. Good questions, though. All right, simplified OEM customization. We already talked a little bit about this and what the customization packages are. And I want to quickly show you what it looks like. So in the desired state image, you might have seen me adding that Dell EMC add-on, right? And today, if you look in the image depot, we have multiple vendors already uploaded their customization packages here. So you see Dell EMC add-ons, HPE customizations already, a newer version of the a newer version, and some Fujitsu and Cisco UCS add-ons as well. So these are basically the partners. We have allowed our partners that we have for custom ISOs as well to upload their vendor add-on packages in here as well. So if you click on a specific vendor add-on package, on the right-hand side, you'll actually see what the added components are. So in this specific case, the HPE customization package, the latest release includes agentless management components, some other drivers in there as well. So if you want to have more visibility on what actually is shipped in that vendor package, you now have immediate insights of what that actually means, right? Because with custom ISOs, that wasn't always really clear, and this way is just more simple and more efficient, because you don't have to wait for them to basically bake or create an image that has all these bits in it. So the custom ISOs, right? We just configure that desired state with your ESXi base image, and now you add the vendor add-on there, and you'll be good to go. So we're looking at future vSphere releases and a quicker adoption of those releases, because it allows the vendors to more quickly create those customization packages as well, and just ship them over to VMware, and we'll deal with it from a VLCM perspective. Okay, cluster quick start. Like I said, just a one slider, for those not familiar with cluster quick start. This is what I meant, right? So you define a new cluster, and you'll immediately be able to just give it a name, enable DRS, HA, maybe even vSAN, and we added that option on top, on the bottom, to manage all the hosts in the cluster with a single image. Now, obviously, you would still need to have all the prerequisites in place, like we discussed. But if you do, you can just set it up, and now all the hosts immediately need to be compliant to that image. So just a far more efficient way of immediately start using VLCM for new clusters. Now, automated checks, a really interesting capability within VLCM. And like I said, it is all about, like with Update Planner, to basically remove the guesswork, because we have the compatibility guide, the VCG, which is also often referred to as the compatibility, hardware compatibility list. It's all the same thing, right? And we are now able to run those checks against the HCL. We do so in the first release for specific devices only. And this is typically vSAN storage controllers, and maybe even NVMe devices, because NVMe devices tend to have an embedded controller in there as well. So NVMe devices might be popping up here as well. And this is what that looks like in the UI. Today in the vSphere 7 releases, you'll get a message that compatibility is checked only for vSphere storage controllers and not with the full VMware compatibility guide. And in this specific case, I see on the lower side that I have one device in this cluster that is HCL compatible. And if I click show details, it'll take me to this view. So a couple of things to note here. Obviously, this is about the storage controller because that is one of the that is supported in the first release of vSphere 7 with VLCM and the integrated compatibility checks. So the Dell HBE adapter that I have here on the lower highlight, I see what is in the image, right? And I see that all the devices on all the 4 hosts in this specific lab are compliant to the image cluster's image, right? But also I see some information about supported driver firmware combinations in the HCL. Now, good news here is that the version that I'm running that is compliant to the desired state image is also a supported combination in the HCL, right? So this is basically removing the need for these storage devices, at least, to look it up in the HCL yourself, and again, act as a time saver if you need to check that compatibility with specific devices. We'll include the view in HCL link on the bottom there as well if you want to triple check. And in update releases, we're looking to include more devices in there as well. So again, first release is about vSphere storage controllers only and potentially some NVMe devices. We're looking to do the same for NICs, for example, or other PCIe devices. Ideally, we do it for all the PCIe adapters in your host, right? And with that, I would like to share a little bit of information about where we're going. We already discussed NSX for update releases. We discussed additional vendor integrations, and that is also a big chunk of that work is done by the vendor itself. So I've already had some customers who were talking about Cisco, and they really want the Cisco to be part of VLCM and that whole framework. On that note, it does help if you ask your, in this specific case, Cisco representative as well. Ask them how they are working with the VLCM setup and if there's work being done on that specific level. But to an earlier question about how this plays along with VxRail and VCF, we do have this slide on providing a little bit more information of what is happening. So obviously on the left-hand side, we have the on-prem vSphere 7, which is all about VLCM, like we discussed in this session, with VUM still being available. We also have VxRail, which is a completely different solution from an LCM perspective. So this is about vCenter, ESXi, vSAN, and the entire hardware stack done on VxRail appliances. Now with VCF, we have that full stack LCM engine, the SDDC manager, and actually on the backend side that leverages VUM and VLCM as well. So a lot of different solutions and a lot of different ways of doing lifecycle management. And especially with VCF, we're looking to integrate VLCM in there a little bit more, because today, I believe if you look it up for support with the management nodes, for example, I believe they still it is only supported to run VUM, but there's already talks going on to switch that over to VLCM as well. Yeah. And with that, I would like to say thank you, but we still have a lot of questions being unanswered.
Yeah, we have some questions in here that I think you may have answered, or I think they're just quick answers here, and a lot revolve around lifecycle management. Go figure, right?
Yeah.
So the first one is a little earlier today from Chris at the top of the list there, and more or less kind of looking to see, the easy way to rebuild a previous cluster from a known state what would be, could you use Lifecycle Manager to, rebuild that cluster?
I'm not sure if I followed that question, to be honest, Chris.
I think it was leaning on all the tools that we had provided, and what to do, and so forth. And, would cluster quick start be the method, like if you lost something, or, is it as simple as, putting the host back into that VLCM cluster and then they become the desired config, right?
Yeah, exactly. Well, yes.
Yes and yes and no.
but it depends, obviously, because, well, when we are talking about DRS and recovery scenarios, there's a lot more to it than just
throwing a host in there. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So if you talk about vCenter Server, we have obviously multiple ways to have that highly available or back that up using the integrated file-based mechanism, for example. But focusing on VLCM and the ESXi host themselves, if you back up, for example, vCenter Server using the file-based method, that'll definitely include the VLCM configuration there as well, obviously. Yeah. So if you have a full disaster recovery going on and you need to restore vCenter and then re-add those hosts or whatever, you'll be good to go with VLCM because that configuration is still in there. But like I said, there's no really easy answer to that.
Yeah. The vendor add-on one from Keith in there, the customers have to download the add-on and add baseline, or is this done behind the scenes when they're doing the vendor add-on? It's not a baseline, it's part of VLCM basically.
Yeah, exactly. So the beauty, like I said, is Keith, with the image repository with VLCM, right? So a couple of things are automatically downloaded once you have that internet access set up. And part of that is the ESXi base image provided by VMware, obviously. But we also do automatically download or upload, for that matter, the vendor add-ons in the image repository as well. So the only thing that is not automatically downloaded is that firmware integration.
Okay. We're gonna, just in the lack of time here, we're gonna take a couple more questions out of here, and then basically the TAMs are offering to answer some of these questions offline with customers as well. So just want to make sure we, so go ahead, Niels, I'll let you flip through the list there if you want to take another 2 or 3 out of the list and answer, and then we can give the people back their time.
Yeah, sure. All right, let me check. Oh yeah, this is actually a really good question by Khalifa. Can VLCM be used to move from 6.7 to 7? Now, this is a common misconception, maybe because VLCM is the path forwards and it is requiring vSphere 7 and up, right? So when customers ask, how can I use VLCM to upgrade from 6.5 or 6.7 to 7, you'll still be using VUM. So you can still use VUM and have that baseline set up with the ESXi ISO and install vSphere 7 on that. So definitely use VUM, but once you have upgraded to vSphere 7, you then have the possibility to move towards VLCM. This is a question that I haven't seen before by Ankush, if I pronounce that correctly. Is there any plan to include ESXi deployment automation in VLCM? Well, this is sort of I'm guessing you mean the bridge in between auto deploy and VLCM. Auto deploy is still used by customers, although, like I stated, it is requiring stateful installations with auto deploy. So, not to my knowledge, there's no plan. Just keep using auto deploy, but make sure that you're using it in the stateful way. And I'll just pick just one.
Ready, go. Let's see. How about I'll pick the last one. What about Cisco framework integration?
Yeah, we talked about that, John.
Yeah, I think so.
yeah, exactly. That is, like I said, we are hopeful that Cisco will put in the effort as well to be integrated in the VLCM framework. Like I said, it really helps us as well, and you as a customer as well, to ask your Cisco representative.
Yeah, it's also important for everyone to know that it's usually most 99% on the third-party vendor as to why they're not supporting this version of vSphere yet. So they want to be part of this. They're working to be part of it. You know, there's a lot of hardware and other things in the way, right? So eventually,
Exactly.
you know, we'll get more people on the train, right, Niels?
It is good to see that a lot of vendors are actually excited about
Yeah.
this opportunity, basically, with vSphere and VLCM. So like I said, we have Dell, HP, we have Lenovo coming on, and some other vendors on the line as well. So yeah, hopefully we'll include all the major vendors in there as well.
So Niels, Nigel, thank you very much for the content today. It's been really great. Thank you very much for the presentation. As we mentioned at the beginning, this presentation was recorded, and your TAM will make that available to you, including the decks with links to everything. Also including Niels and Nigel's blogs and Twitter handles. As you can see, these guys have got a ton of experience. Nigel's a VCIX, Niels is a VCDX. I think he's got one over on you there, Nigel. But really fantastic blogs and Twitter content as well. So do check these guys out, both technical marketing architects. Thank you. Please join us next month when we'll be looking at the vRealize lifecycle management and how that can be used to accelerate your time to value with John Diaz. And with that, I'll give you your day back. And thank you very much all. We really appreciate you attending this webinar. Thank you.
Thank you.